You know, the women must have been patient, just like Sue had been patient. And so they said it again, understanding the disciples' disbelief and their reluctance to hearing the good news of the gospel. Christ has risen!
Christ has risen indeed!
Now Peter jumps up and he starts to run toward the tomb. Peter, you know that good old, you gotta love the guy, Peter. He responds before he has a chance to think about it. Peter jumps up. Just remember how he jumped up out of the boat when he saw Jesus walking on the water? Peter promising Jesus that he would never, ever deny him. Peter, who on a whim seizes the opportunity to leave his prosperous fishing trade and follow an itinerant rabbi to go fishing for people. He's the one who goes chasing after the truth. Did he think maybe he'd get a chance to beg Jesus for forgiveness for having denied him just the other day while he was warming himself around a campfire when he heard the cock crow 3 times? Did Peter run because he remembered the time he did believe that Jesus was the Messiah? Did he run because he needed to run towards something, someone larger than his own meager life to help him get through the darkness in which he was living? Peter ran because he wanted to believe what he and the disciples and the women had been doing for the past year had not been in vain after all. He ran because he wanted to see for himself the truth of that unbelievable Easter morning. That Christ has risen. Christ has risen indeed. We know what he found. He found what the women found, an empty tomb. But what did that mean? What does it mean to us? How will the empty tomb change our lives, change our hearts, change the way we perhaps love one another? The gospel story does not tell us immediately how this event changed Peter's life, only that he looked into a tomb, an empty tomb, and saw the burial clothes and went home, and he was amazed. He was amazed at what had happened. Peter was amazed. And we who know the rest of the story know that Peter was so amazed that he became the rock on which our Christian faith was born. He was so amazed that what happened that day gave him his own life again. His life turned around, and he defended what he believed, so much so that he lost his life for what he had once denied. What happened is that the deserting disciples, the disloyal devotees, the scattered believers returned to break bread and to share the cup of salvation. And in doing so, we are told their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And then they went around the world proclaiming what only the foolish would believe, that God had raised Jesus from the dead, that death is not the final word when it comes to our lives, and that love always overcomes evil, and light overcomes the world's darkness. And so with boldness, they proclaimed, Christ has risen.
Christ has risen indeed.
So what do you expect to find this Easter morning? In your lives, in your relationship, in your church, in your world? What are you hoping to discover or perhaps rediscover when you come to church this morning to pray, to sing, Do you come expecting to find that which is wholly unexpected? I confess, I mostly do not. But then, surprisingly, the love of God shows up in a child who tears a huge hunk of bread from the communion table and turns and goes skipping back to his pew where he eats that bread with such delight it radiates his being. Or the mercy of God shows up in yet another child who, on taking his first communion, is trying to be very proper. And he takes a little cup and he drinks all of it. And then he looks around to see if anybody else is watching, and he sneaks another one. Or I've been told that God also shows up in a child who told his mom one day after communion, who said, "Mom, that communion is the best snack in the whole world." And so, you take a bit of the bread of life and a bit of that grape juice salvation, and it's a mystery, and it tastes delicious, at least to children. So perhaps would we all have that kind of enthusiasm, the enthusiasm of children who, on finding the taste of God so delicious, so enticing, so absolutely necessary, that we find ourselves skipping back to our places in life, away from the empty tomb, amazed at what we find there, and boldly declare to the world what we know to be true, that Christ has risen. Christ has risen indeed. Amen. Let's take a moment for reflection.